All right, when you pay for something, you have bills to pay, you have things you want to purchase, you have to have a way to pay for those. And we're going to talk about cash and checks. I know a lot of people think checks are obsolete, that people don't write checks anymore, but some people write checks. And we'll talk about credit and debit cards later. But there's some advantages and disadvantages to paying with cash or paying with a check. An advantage of paying with cash is that you only spend the money you have. If you go in a store and you have $10, you're not going to buy anything more than $10 worth because you're only going to spend the money you have. Can't make a mistake there. A disadvantage is you need to make sure you know your math. Make sure you can count change. Uh, most stores use computer systems and cash registers to calculate change so they don't make mistakes. But if you're purchasing something in from a local person, you need to make sure they give you the correct change back. That's important. Also, disadvantage of cash, if you lose it, you'll lose it. If you lose your cash, there's very little chance you're ever going to get it back. It's just gone because there's no trace in that. But if you're spending cash, you know you're not going to spend over what you have. You can't spend any more than what you've got. Now, checks are, there's a picture of a check here. This is an example, and when you put your money in the bank, you can write checks to spend that money. So you're spending your own money from your from your income that you got. And these are good things to use if you're paying a bill by mail. If you're paying by mail, then uh, a check is a secure way to do it. If you send cash in the mail, there's no security there. If someone stole your mail and stole that cash, there's no way to trace that. But if your check didn't appear at the biller when it should have, you can cancel that check and your money is okay. Uh, Another thing about checks that's a good thing is when you have a bank account, you have money in the bank, they don't charge you to write checks. You can write checks to pay for things. At a disadvantage, you got to make sure you do good record keeping, especially if you share a bank account. Like when when you're older and you're married, you and your wife might have a checking account, a joint checking account. So if you do, and say you had $100 in the bank, and you went and purchased something at the store and it cost $70, and you forgot to write it down, and you forgot to tell your wife, and she didn't realize that you'd spent that $70, and then she went to pay a bill and the bill was $40, you only had $100 in the bank, so now you're overdrawn. And overdrafts are a bad thing because besides the fact that you've went in the hole, there's no way for that person that you write the check to, they'll take your check. But when they go to send it to the bank's not going to honor it because you don't have enough money in the bank. So what they're going to do is the business that you wrote the check to is going to give you a charge. Usually it's $25 to $50 because you wrote them a check that was not a good check. Plus, the bank is going to charge you maybe $25 because you went over the amount that you had in your checking account. So just that little $40 or $50 charge you made by writing that check is going to cost you at least $25 from the bank, at least $25 from the business you wrote it to. So that's an extra $50 you lost because you went over. So if you're writing checks, you need to make sure you're keeping good records, and you know how much money you have in the bank, and you don't write a check for more than you have in the bank. And if you're sharing your account with someone, you have to communicate and make sure everyone knows what's what. And then in today's day and age, another disadvantage of cash and check is internet purchases. I've done almost all my shopping for Christmas this year on the internet, and you can't pay for that with cash or a check unless you meet someone locally to pick up the thing you bought. If they're shipping it to you, they usually will not take a check, and you can't send them cash through the mail. So a credit or debit card is good for online purchases, but cash or check, as long as you're responsible, is a good way to pay for things.